Maurice, at that point, was finished for the time being in my life. The correspondence at that point was only relating to family, how they were doing and how I was doing. And things took on a more or less normal aspect. I had not answered his personal letters, so he finally stopped. And I now have to go back to the passage where I had a lot of relationships with many boyfriends, some in the army and some out of the army. And about 7-8 months before I finished my 2 years of service, that's when I met Matka. Actually, I knew Matka for quite a while. We would just hello, goodbye. There was no real relationship there. I always found him pleasant looking, but I never paid that much attention to him until we got to know each other a little better, and I realized what a fine human being and sensitive man he was, much more so than Maurice B. He was kind, considerate, very unusual human being. I was amazed with his behavior. He was such a fine young man and attractive, and came from a very nice Polish background. And eventually we did. I had at the beginning a very casual sexual relationship with him. It developed very strong. And that's when he insisted on me meeting his parents, and in fact he came often to see my family, Natanya, my uncle and aunt, my cousins. We became very, very close to each other. Well, actually we were inseparable. It was at the time we were so much together, and where we visited his parents a lot, and I spent weekends in Haifa when we were both off, and we each had gotten passes. At that time, we never said we're engaged and we're going to get married, but it was assumed by his family, by my family in Israel, that it was just going to happen. And when I had only about 2 months left of serving my time in the army, that's when all these feelings came out. I was afraid. And mostly I think I was afraid of the struggling. I didn't think of money per se. It wasn't the money part. It was just struggling. The apartments were hard to get. Food was hard to get. Everything was so difficult. Those years were very difficult in Israel. And I just chickened out. I said to myself, well, I do have a place to go back to my mother in Belgium. And I did say it a while ago how kind of mixed up I was anyway. As close as I felt to Matka and secure in his love and everything, I myself wasn't functioning that well, because in a million years I never should have thought of going back to Belgium. The thought never should have occurred to me. I should have either stayed in Israel or go straight to America, to my father. Why on earth I had to go back to Belgium, I'll never know. I can't even analyze it. I can't understand it. It's completely beyond me. At the time I remember saying to myself, I miss my mother. I want to see my mother again. Maybe it was facing her and being forgiven. Maybe that's what I don't know. All I knew was that I tried my best to explain to Matka that he should understand that I come from divorced parents, that I did originally come to Israel because of my home life. I never told him about Maurice and my relationship. I never told him about my stepfather and I, of course. But I did say how troubled I was at times, where I was very insecure, and that it was very important to me to go back to my mother. And I remember him saying to me, "You'll never come back to Israel once you leave." Deep down, he must have known that the economic aspect of Israel frightened me. We never spoke about it. I never could even articulate it. I never knew that's what it was. It's years later that I knew it was the practical side of me that could not live in Israel. But he must have known then already, because he came right on and said, "Fanny, you'll never come back except maybe in 10, 15 years to visit. But once you leave now, you'll never come back." Well, he begged me, he implored me, what he didn't try to hold me back. And there was no way. Now, while I was still going with Matka, and there was about 2 months left of army life, Edith and I, my girlfriend Edith and I, still saw each other, of course, many times in those years. She with a beautiful blue uniform and me with my khaki uniform. And I remember talking to her about my feelings regarding my wanting to go back to Belgium and see my mother and all that. And she I remember, said, "Gee, it's very funny, I feel the same way." At that particular period, she had gone with a soldier, and she had lived, they did have sexual intercourse already by then. And she went with him for a very long time, over a year and a half, with the one and only boyfriend. He also wanted to marry her. It's very funny how she also chickened out. And she made him the same promise. Now, we didn't discuss this. It's just one of those things that we both had experienced. And maybe it's really because we originally went to Israel without being Zionists. Maybe that's why. The ironies in life are so amazing. We didn't see each other really that often at that point, because her base was much further south. And here we have this discussion, and we find out that we both weren't ready yet for marriage, that first we were going to go back to Belgium and see what happens. And that's why my relationship with Edith was always so strange. To meet at the age of 15 and a half and to have such parallel lives without emulating, without doing it on purpose, that's for sure. I find it amazing, just amazing. Well, anyway, every now and then, since I started recording, I've been thinking I'd like to relate some funny incidents, some comedy, a little comedy instead of all this heavy stuff. And there's so few, there's so little of that. There's one incident that came up which I thought was very funny. Not only funny, but it took a lot of, in Hebrew it's called chutzpah. Edith and I were, I said before, the army paid very little for each soldier. It was very little. Nobody even traveled. Everybody hitchhiked in Israel. Nobody had money for transportation. The times were very, very difficult. Now, when we had made the decision, which we found out later on, that we were planning on returning to Belgium after the army, we didn't have really any clothes except for our uniforms. I think I owned one little dress, one skirt, and I remember I had gotten those 2 other dresses a year prior to that when Maurice B. brought it back to me, but by then it was so worn out already. We really didn't have any decent clothes. And to go back to Belgium and on a boat, you have to have a few changes, So we had both decided that any old garbage that we owned and any old stuff that anyone wanted to give us, whether it was family or friends or acquaintances, we would put everything into a valise, and then we would go to Jaffa, which is right nearby Tel Aviv, on one of our days off, from the army. And we would stand at a corner street with the valise open, and all the garbage, whatever we had to sell, would be inside of it. And we would just sell it to the Arabs. It was like an open market. Now, we really weren't allowed to do that. We had no license, number one. Number two, it was old stuff, old clothes, old gadgets. And it took us 2 good weeks to accumulate things that we could even sell. I know my aunt gave me some old, I don't know what the hell she gave me, all kinds of junk. And she got some stuff, and I did, and we filled in a huge valise full of old things, old clothing, old gadgets. And we decided to go to one of those streets where they sell at the open market, stand on the street and see how much we could get for all that stuff. Now, the Arabs who lived in Jaffa were very, very stupid, ignorant, stupid, no sechel whatsoever. And the bargaining that went on was unreal. We immediately, whatever it was that we were selling, we right away asked for 5 lira more automatically, because we knew it had to come down. And they did a fantastic buy, these stupid Arabs, by us finally, after sighing and pleading and this and that, we finally said, okay, you'll get it for less. And they were so happy. They saw they really made a big bargain. So anyway, we sold every single piece of item we had into that valise. We split the money in two, and we went out and we bought clothes. Oh, I forgot to mention that we had each written to our mothers, and it was all said they were going to send us the ticket and pay to come back. The Israeli government did not give us a hard time, because we did do our duty. We did finish the 2 years in the army, so that was no problem. But the bureaucracy took a long time. So after I finished the army in June '53, it took about 4 months till I was ready to leave. Her boat only left 3 weeks later. We couldn't get the same ship, the same boat. So I was a civilian for 4 extra months until I could return to Belgium. At that point, I lived at my uncle and aunt. They were always so wonderful, like real parents. And I always slept on the couch that was in the dining room. The dining room was the living room, the dining room, the bedroom. The dining room was everything. And they were just wonderful. And I spent 4 months with them. Now, it was 4 months after I finished in the army and until I was ready to leave. Oh, I'd like to say that my uncle and aunt were very, very disappointed that I had decided to leave Israel. I kept saying so many times that I'm going to come back and I'll marry Matka. They loved Matka. They thought he was such a wonderful guy. So I told them it's only a temporary thing, that I just feel like seeing my mother again, that it's okay. Nothing is going to change. I'll just stay there a few months and then I'll come back. Well, of course, they couldn't talk me. They couldn't change my mind, needless to say. That was that. The incident related before about Edith and I standing on a street corner selling garbage to the Arabs, I remember that very vividly, and it really was a lot of nerve, and I just think it was very funny. We were both in such a good mood after that. We had such a great time together, laughing it off, because we couldn't believe how much money we had made out of that, all that garbage. So it's not exactly funny, but I know that money went for clothes, and we didn't wear them. I mean, I certainly wasn't going to wear it and use it up. I wanted to be new on the boat going home. So I was looking so hard. The first 2 weeks I was away from the army that I was finished, I was looking so hard in Netanya to find a job. And the only thing available was that a photographer who had a studio, and people would come in and have their pictures taken in another room. And then he also had a lab, not a lab, a dark room. And I remember going from door to door to store to store. I was ready to do anything to make some money, whether it was selling clothes or departments, anything, a waitress. I was willing to do anything. When I arrived at that photographer's studio, he said that he's looking for somebody who would like to teach to develop pictures. And I told him that I was looking for a job, and of course I couldn't tell him that it was temporary, that I was going to leave soon, that in 4 months I was going to leave. So he decided to, he taught me everything he could about developing pictures. And within 3 weeks, I could do the black and white. Come to think of it, that's all there was, is black and white. It was about July, the end of June 1953, and I don't remember at all any colored pictures at that time.